and this person is chilled. Too hot. So the situations that you work with and the systems that you work with, what examples do you have of this kind of a pattern in the systems that you work with? Can you see these kinds of structures? What about the environmental sustainability? We want environmental sustainability. Why do we want it? Why do we want it?
Sustainability.
Well, so that it promotes the health of
Next generation.
okay. It promotes health of people and the planet. Why don't we want environmental sustainability?
Cost.
Cost. Maybe another one for time. Right? Takes too much time, takes too much cost. It's too much work. What other ones do you see this kind of tackle? Other examples from your life? What other examples from your life?
How about going to work?
Going to work. So I want to go to work. Why do I want to go to work?
Money.
To get some money. Why do I not want to go to work?
Less.
Need some rest.
Less stress.
Rest, stress. I've got a conflict between making money and having stress. And behind it is going to work or not going to work. Other examples? Okay, well, Altshuler recognized that this was the key to inventive problem solving. And you'll see this pattern in the ideation software. So in the ideation brainstorming software, which is a software that retails very inexpensively, for that software it says, can you find this pattern in your system? In the more expensive software, you map your system. So in Knowledge Wizard or in Innovation Workbench, you get a team and you say, okay, what are the elements of our system and how do they react to each other? So this is actually something that I did with Bosch Corporation just a few weeks ago. And they had a problem with brake roughness, and we came up with 9 ideas that they're going out to patents for 2 days at Triz. But here you can see that there are certain, if you map out the system, and then the software finds the contradictions for you. And there's really 3 approaches in Triz. So actually in the software you can't see it on the screen, but some things here are yellow. For example, this is yellow. So because something good comes from this and something bad is associated with it too, it's red box. So this is yellow. You want a high plant force to retain the wheel, but you don't want a high plant force because it causes dissimilar voltages, or it causes wheel to lug nut run out, or wheel to bolt problems, or wheel to rotor problems, or rotor to problems. So real systems are look like this. And you can use the software, the Triz software, to map the system and then find leverage points for improvement. Now, once you have this kind of a pattern identified, then there's 3 approaches to change the system. One approach is to work with the physical contradiction, and there's systems of Triz operators to work with the physical contradiction. Or you can say, let's take the function that improves and make it improve even more. And there are systems of Triz operators for that. Or you can say, let's take the function that's degrading and make it degrade less or not degrade at all. And there's systems of Triz operators to work on that. So those are the three basic Triz approaches to improving a system. So you can work in this box, and this box. And if you're working on a complex problem, you want to address all three approaches.
What about if we take a compromise that is even faster and can solve the problem?
What kind of compromise?
Well, we mean, assuming that you say just now that you're going to work and relaxing at home, you take in between part-time job, something like that. Maybe it's very safe to solve the problem in between.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that. So I've got a problem here where I want to go to work and I don't want to go to work. And then, but Altshuler found that there are generic ways of addressing this. And so in the software, there's a procedure to address this, and we'll look at that procedure.
What's the difference between this one? Because what I see is just like
It's like a causal loop diagram. It's a system diagram to show how the system works.
So it's just a constant mapping.
It's a little different than mind mapping. In mind mapping, you say, here's my problem, and here's all the things that I know associated with it. This goes a little further than that. It says these things associated with it, how do they relate to each other? So one leads to another, that leads to another, that leads. So it maps the relationships of those things. So many times you might start out with a mind map and then move into a diagram like this.
Larry, going back to that slide,
Which one?
just one more, yes. Do you have more green boxes than red, or sometimes more red boxes than green here?
Depends on the problem. So every situation is unique. So you get your team together and you map out what's in your system. Now many times, just doing this creates huge ahas for your team members. So I was asked to work with the small business group with the U.S. House of Representatives. How can we make small businesses more competitive? And we did a very complex map like this, showing the relationship of all the things in the system. And that was a huge eye-opener for these congressmen because they had never looked at it as a system and never saw all the relationships and how complex the system was before. And just mapping that out gave them a lot of ideas. So they'd never looked at it that way.
And the title of the mapping was Competitiveness of the Industry.
Yeah, yeah. It involves taking the knowledge of your team and then putting it on paper. And what the system we're trying to deal with, what does it consist of, and how do these things relate to each other? And and it involves some discussion because you might have a box here and a box there, and some people want the arrow to go this way and some want it to go this way. And I say, the arrow can only go one way. Which way does it mostly go? And they'll have some big discussions on what those relationships are, or even if there is a relationship. Yes, exactly.
Just out of curiosity, did you do this with the software?
Yes. Yeah, it was a real problem with a real team.
It's a manual work, but I guess it would take some time.
I worked with a group of engineers from Bosch, about 15 engineers. And we had 2 days set aside to do some problem solving with Triz. So we had a problem, we mapped the problem like this. And then the software found us directions for leverage points to change the system. Then we brainstormed using Triz operators around those leverage points, came up with about 60 ideas 9 of which they said they're going to try for patents on. And we did that in 2 days of work. There's a couple ideas they came up with. They were very excited about it. So they feel they made some breakthrough. So that's inventive situation. Then Boris says you need to identify the inventive situation. The next thing you need to do is to define the problem. And there's 3 key things associated with defining the problem. It's ideality, the systems approach, and then the guided brainstorming. Now, why do we have to spend time defining the problem? Huh? Setting the objective. Why is that important? You know, so many teams, Boris and Alla, and I've seen it myself, and Boris and Alla have seen it many, many times, is that a team goes and solves the wrong problem because they never really understood what the original problem actually was. So they come up with a solution, implement the solution, and the problem hasn't changed. They came up with a solution, but it's the wrong problem. A different problem than the one they had.
But sometimes it is an advantage when you're looking for this problem, but you solve the problem.
So in both the Knowledge Wizard and in Innovation Workbench, and you see a little bit of it in brainstorming, Boris and Alla said the first thing they want a team to do is think about what is the problem we're really trying to solve. And in Knowledge Wizard and Innovation Workbench, there's an Innovation Situation Questionnaire, which is a series of questions that Boris and Alla came up with. And they said, we want, before a team starts to work on a problem, we want you to thoroughly answer these questions. And my experience is that when you're working on a real problem, it takes a team about 6 hours to answer those questions. Now, when I spent 2 days with Bosch, I had those Bosch team members answer those questions ahead of time. So I worked with 2 of the team members. We answered those questions, and we sent the answers to all the other team members and said, give us your input to this. And we collected the input from everybody before we started the Triz session. Because I have seen so many times that a team thinks they're trying to solve this particular issue. They go through those questions, and by the time they finish the questions, and you say, what is the problem you're really trying to solve? It's a different problem than what they started out with by the time they answer those questions. So defining the problem is very important if you're going to come up with a good solution. Now, Altshuler has a couple things associated with that. One is the notion of ideality. Now, this is related to Altshuler's thinking in terms of how systems evolve over time. So one of the laws of evolution of how systems evolve over time, as Altshuler said, a system must evolve so that its ratio of ideality improves over time. And he defined ideality as the sum of all the useful functions over the sum of all the harmful functions of a system. And Altshuler said that a system will evolve over time to increase its ideality. And you'll find other people saying very similar things. So if you talk to Dr. Taguchi, he'll talk about what is the ideal function. So when Dr. Taguchi is applying his method, he forces the team to think about ideal function. And Altshuler said that the ideal perfect system is a system that performs all its required functions without actually existing. So if Altshuler was with us and we were working on a problem, he would say, what's the ideal system look like? How can we take the functions of the system and have them performed with this, without any components of the system actually existing to make that happen? That would be the most ideal system.
You mean the good system will evolve by itself?
No. doesn't evolve by itself,
Consists of nothing.
but an ideal system, imagine a system where all functions are performed with existing resources. Nothing changes, everything remains the same, and all the issues are resolved. So Altshuler would force us to think differently. So why does he want to force us to think differently? You know, if this is where our problem is, so many times we think of continuous improvement. So here's our problem, and we come up with just a few ideas that make the system just a little bit better. We tighten it, we come up with some continuous improvements. So we have a system that's a little bit improved, but it's not much different from where we originally started. What Altshuler says is, instead of thinking about where your problem is at, what does ideality look like? If you had a perfect system, what would that look like? And Altshuler said, instead of thinking about continuous improvement, think about the perfect system. And there's a zone here of very high-level innovation. And maybe we can't make the system perfect, but if we make a system that's somewhere in the zone of high-level innovation, we will leapfrog a lot of continuous improvement. So Altshuler would challenge the team to think about, what is ideality? What are we really trying to strive for? Can we think of what the ideal system really looks like? What is it we're really trying to do? Are we trying to make a little continuous improvement over here, or are we really trying to come up with something that looks like this? Yeah.
You still need continuous improvement, please stand so it's kind of a journey.
Continuous improvement is always good. But in Triz, what we really want to do is think in terms of ideality and see if we can't leapfrog, make a breakthrough improvement. Leapfrog a lot of little continuous improvements.
But ideality is something very difficult to control.
Pardon?
It is something very difficult to control. Ideality.
Ideality, yes. Yeah, but what we need to do, what Altshuler wants you to do is he wants you to challenge your thinking. Think in terms of what is ideal. How can you actually get a system to perform these functions without the components actually existing? So this is why a lot of people like to use Triz with value analysis and value engineering, or to eliminate waste. Because are there unnecessary components we can take out of the system and still have those functions accomplished in some other way?
So this is very much different from the improvement, continuous improvement concept of small improvement.
It can be small improvements, or it can be big leapfrogs. Or you might want to make a huge leapfrog and then back out. So I may come up with a new innovation that completely changes my industry, but instead of, but I back off from that, and then I sell this innovation to customers, and when my competition catches up, then I give them the next innovation, and then just as my competition starts to catch up, then I introduce my next innovation, and I direct the evolution of my system. That's why Boris and Ella call it like a directed evolution. That you know where your system's going. When you make an innovation, your competition strives to catch up, and then you introduce the next innovation. So many times it's you might plan this big improvement, but you put it in small steps and you just lead the way. Your competition always has trouble catching up. There's a current state of ideality that exists now. So if you look at what are the useful functions, the sum of all useful functions and the sum of all the harmful functions, and if you want to, you can express it with Taguchi's loss function. You can come up with a certain level of ideality for the current technology, But then you say, what do I want the system to be in the future? And then try to find a way to make the system more ideal. So the Triz tools and techniques are really about improving the ideality of the system. How do we take a system's current level of ideality and make it better? So as I resolve these contradictions, I'm improving the ideality of the system. As I eliminate waste, I'm improving the ideality of the system. As I add more useful functions to a current system, I'm improving the system's ideality. So here's an example from Altshuler, a problem that Altshuler worked on. That there's a specimen that we want to test. How resistant is this specimen in this particular acid? So we have the glass container, the acid, and the specimen. The problem is that the acid is eating the specimen and also eats the glass container. And so they're having big problems with getting a glass container to live. And Altshuler said, well, what's ideal? Now, ideally, I would like the system to perform the function of the glass container without the glass container existing. So now I've got the acid and I've got the specimen, but there's no glass. So I want the function of the glass to be performed by other elements in the existing system. Now I don't have to worry about the glass being eaten by the acid. I do have to worry about the acid going all over the floor. So if we have this situation, it's more ideal. How do we handle it? Pardon? Put the acid in the specimen. Right. So I can take the specimen and turn it into a container and then put the acid into the specimen. Now in Triz there's something called a super effect. So many times you solve a problem with Triz and then there's an unexpected benefit that you didn't plan for. So they solved this problem with Triz by just thinking about ideality. They said we can take the specimen and turn it into a container. Now how they take the specimen and turn it into a container is a secondary problem. So in Triz, every time you come up with a solution, you know, many people see the solution and they give up and say, you've got to take the specimen and turn it into a container. We don't know how to do that. Too much work. Forget about it. But you have secondary problems. Every time you come up with a high-level inundation in Triz, there'll be 3 to 5 typical secondary problems that have to be solved to implement the solution. These problems are much easier to solve than the original problem was. And you can use Triz to solve those secondary problems. So we've got a secondary problem here. How do we take the specimen and turn it into a container? So we have a secondary problem to solve. But don't give up just because you have secondary problems. So Boris Lotan likes to take walks through forests. We were walking one time and I saw this mushroom on the forest floor. The mushroom was bright red with white stripes. And I said, look at that. And Boris says, Larry, can you eat that mushroom? I'm thinking, yeah, I can eat it once. He says, no, suppose you're in a situation where you have to eat that mushroom. He's either eating that type of mushroom or because there's nothing else there or you die. Can you eat that mushroom? Well, maybe, maybe I can take it and boil it in water and then throw the water out and boil it again and do that 8 times and weaken the poison so I can eat that mushroom. Or maybe there's some other food I can take with the mushroom that's an antidote to the poison, or maybe I can find a way to eat the mushroom. Boris's point is that anytime you solve a problem, there's always these mushrooms lying around. Can you eat that mushroom? So he said many times teams come up with an innovation, but then they see the secondary problems associated with implementing it and they give up. He said, don't give up. say, how can I eat that mushroom? And go back and use Triz on those secondary problems. And he said those secondary problems will be easier to solve than your original problem was. So there's the notion here of secondary problems. The other notion is a super effect, that many times you solve a problem with Triz and there are unexpected benefits. So they solved this problem with Triz, but then they found, you know what? I can test more than one acid at the same time. So maybe I have a specimen and I drill holes into it, and I put acid A, acid B, acid C, acid D. I can do a number of tests simultaneously. And they said, you know what? We have to test at different temperatures. So maybe in this direction I can put a temperature gradient and have the specimen very hot on this end and very cool on this end. And I can test different acids at different temperatures and do it all simultaneously. So not only did they eliminate the glass container to make their system more ideal, but they had a super effect from this problem that we can test a variety of acids and we can do it at a variety of temperatures all at the same time. Now, I have a friend, a Triz master by the name of Zenobi Roizen, who does a lot of consulting with Boeing. And he worked with Boeing Triz people and they solved a problem. And that problem had a super effect in that it gave some features to their airplane. The solution gave their airplane certain features the competition did not have. And when they shared these features with their customers, they wound up in $1.5 billion extra sales from what they were anticipating. A super effect from solving the problem with Triz. So a super effect saved them, earned them $1.5 billion extra dollars. Now the other thing that Altshuler liked to do is he would use a systems approach in defining the problem. So what Altshuler would do is he would actually create what people call the 9 boxes. So he would say, here's my system, here's my super system, here's my subsystem, here's my past, here's my present, here's my future. So Altshuler would say, okay, for the system I am interested in, what has happened in the past, what's happening in the present? Then he would use laws and lines of evolution. What do we think is going to could happen in the future? Super system, past, present, future. Subsystem, past, present, future. Altshuler would actually do this twice. He would do this once for all the helpful functions and once for all the harmful functions of a system. And so he would get kind of a perspective of past, present, future, as well as supersystem, system, subsystem. And Boris and Alla said, well, it's helpful to think that way when you're defining problem. So we have a system or a function or a problem. Can we think about what's happened in the past, what can happen in the future? Can we think about subsystems, and can we think about supersystems? Can we think about causes, and can we think about effects? Can we think of inputs, can we think of outputs? So one of the things in the Innovation Situation Questionnaire, you'll find it in the Knowledge Wizard or in the Innovation Workbench. You'll also see it in the brainstorming software, looking more like this, is as we're thinking about our problem, let's think about the system, the supersystem, the subsystem. Let's think about the past, the present, the future. Let's think about the inputs and the outputs and the causes and the effects. And as we think about those things, first of all, many times as you think about those things, ideas will come into your head. So as I'm working with the team with the innovation situation questionnaire, if we come up with an idea at any time in the process, we immediately record the idea. And just like in any type of brainstorming, there's no bad idea. So you evaluate the ideas later on. If some member comes up with something in their head, an idea, you just accept it and record it. You don't want to lose an idea, a good idea, any idea at any time in the process. So by thinking about this, we're going to come up with ideas. Also, by thinking about this, we'll better understand the system we're working in. And then at the end of that exercise, the software will ask you, what is ideality and what is it you're really trying to solve, you're really trying to accomplish. And so you may come up with a different problem definition after you've thought about these things than what you started out with. So one thing the software will ask an innovation situation questionnaire is it'll say, what is the system? You'd be surprised how teams struggle to define what the system is. Do you really know what the system is you're working with? How would you define it? And it's very important to think about that. What's the primary function of the system? What are we really trying to solve? What changes in the system might improve the situation? When you're working on a system, why is it important to look at the subsystems and super systems? Why is it important? Understand the relationships. Just think in terms of, how does an innovation occur? So an innovation occurred with the creation of an automobile. But that innovation needed an engine. And the engine needed fuel. So the Niepce brothers from Paris, France, came up with the idea of an internal combustion engine. But they used plant pollen for fuel. Plant pollen. So they ignited plant pollen in the engine to create fuel. They didn't have gasoline. Gasoline came later. It was invented by the idea of cracking oil to create gasoline was the invention of 5 Russian scientists. And they originally created that cracking process to produce kerosene because whale oil was becoming more and more scarce for lights, and they wanted a substitute for whale oil. And they found that kerosene worked well, so when they cracked oil to make kerosene, gasoline was a big wasteful byproduct and they were throwing it away. And then someone said, can we take that gasoline that's completely wasteful and tried it in the Niepce brothers' internal combustion engine and it worked pretty well. And they said, not only does it work well, we're getting it free because it's a byproduct of the kerosene operation. Right? But if the gasoline hadn't been invented, the cracking process hadn't been invented, or the internal combustion engine hadn't been invented, you wouldn't have been able to produce the automobile. But then once the automobile is produced, there's no gas stations, there's no roads in the super system. So how is an automobile going to flourish when the super system doesn't have any gas stations or roads or infrastructure? So the way the automobile penetrated into the super system is it penetrated into the super system where the super system currently had some big issues. And where would the super system have some big issues that an automobile would help? Well, the first real big issue in the super system was fires. They had horses, but horses were terrible when it came to fires. Because in the first place, you had to take the horse to the fire, and the horse didn't want to go to the fire. And in the second place, the horse couldn't carry that much water. And so they said, boy, we could really use a truck that could carry a lot of water, and it wouldn't fight us in terms of going to the fire. So the super system said, I need this innovation at the system level for fires. And that's where the automobile made its first entrance into the super system, was to fight fires. And then you saw it with delivery trucks, because horses would deliver things all day long, and delivery, the person would stop and then they'd go in to deliver something and the horse would have to wait. Well, the horse didn't like waiting. It didn't like the job of delivery. The horse was always cranky. It was hard to work with. Delivery trucks. And then the super system started to make roads and provide gas stations, and then other growth came. But there's an interaction between the system, the super system, and the subsystem, and the interplay of those. So something happened first in the system, that the subsystem elements had to exist first, then the system invention came together, and then it had to penetrate. Then there was a huge growth in the super system that fed growths in the system and the subsystem to cause the whole system to flourish. But there's a very careful interaction. And also, so it's important to look at, for this system to function, what's needed in the subsystem, what's needed in the super system, and what's needed to be ready of those for the system to flourish. What about past and future? Why did Altshuler look at the past and he looked at the future? So here we say, what critical events occurred in the past? What will the next generation of the system look like? Can we go back and change a critical event? Can we implement a future solution today? So many times, the solution to our problems have already been tried in the past. So in Dearborn, where I lived, Henry Ford created a museum of history of technology. And I can go into that museum and I can see a hybrid vehicle from 1903. So that vehicle has a gasoline engine in the front and an electric engine in the rear. 1903. And that company went out of production because their vehicle was too complex and it was too hard to service. So here's an invention in the system. It tried to flourish, but the technology and the super system and the subsystem just wasn't there. But the idea was a good idea, and today the technology exists to make that idea work. Back then it didn't. But I can go back then, see the idea, and say that idea tried to occur then, but the super system and the subsystem weren't ready. Well, they're ready today. So I can just take that idea and use it. Inputs and outputs. What enters the system? What exits the system? How can an input become an output? What changes to the input or output would improve the situation? So we think in terms of inputs and outputs. Causes and effect. What causes the problem? What's the harmful result? How is the cause transformed into the effect? What changes would eliminate the cause? What changes would eliminate the effect? So these are questions that we think about. As we think about them, we come up with ideas, we document the ideas, and when we finish the questions, we ask ourselves, what is ideality, and what is it we're really trying to accomplish? What is it we're really trying to achieve? So, I want to do an exercise together. So, do we need to break for lunch now, or do we?
We can break for lunch now.
Okay, we're going to break for lunch now. I'm going to complete these software codes for you, and then after lunch we'll do this exercise with the brainstorming. So, okay.
1:45. 1:45 would be good. Yep.
To measure the length of the snake. But the problem with these snake handlers is they cost a lot of money. And so they would like to use very inexperienced people to measure the length of the snake. But the problem with that is there's a high risk these people could get bitten and injured. So how would we formulate this problem using this kind of a pattern? So they want something to happen because it produces something that's good, but they don't want it to happen because it can produce something that's bad. So what goes in here? What is it that they want and they don't want? Huh? They want to measure the length of the snake. They have to do that. But who are they going to use to measure this length? Inexperienced labor or cheap labor, right? So they want to use inexperienced labor. And why do they want to use inexperienced labor? It's cheap. And why do they don't want to use inexperienced labor? Risk. Yeah, risk of being bitten. Risk of injury. So this is what they're dealing with. So they have the technical contradiction of they want something inexpensive, but as we get more inexpensive, the risk goes up. As the risk goes down, then the labor becomes more expensive. So that's the technical contradiction. The physical contradiction is I want to use inexperienced labor, but I don't want to use inexperienced labor. So this is what we're dealing with, and now we want to use the software to address it. So if we go to the Knowledge Wizard software, I'm sorry, let's go to the brainstorming software. And let's look at the software itself. So here you see on the right-hand side, yeah, get up to the screen on the brainstorming software. Is everyone here?
Yes.
Yes? Anyone not here? You only have to put the unlock code in once. After that, you can continue. But you have to hit unlock the first time. Yeah, it's the first time you hit unlock. After that, you can continue. You have to put the dash in too. So 492.0.234.234.234. A different principle or a different perspective. And we just continue this way, continuing to explore the problem from different points of view and different Triz operators until we've exhausted the knowledge of our team. All the ideas we've come up with are ideas we've come up with before. But you'll have many times more ideas than what you had off of traditional brainstorming. In addition, because the brainstorming in Triz is guided with perspectives that have proven in the past to be helpful, then the quality of the ideas will be much better. So we're looking at improving the quality and the quantity of ideas. We're brainstorming. Triz doesn't provide the ideas come from your team, but Triz guides the brainstorming. So that's how Triz helps. So now we're going to work on defining our problem, but as we're defining our problem, we're going to also come up with new ideas. So we want to start out by looking at the system. How could modifying the system structure influence the problem that we're trying to solve? Now there's an example here. So in the design of off-road motorcycles, it's desirable to maximize the fuel storage capability while minimizing the weight of the motorcycle. So regard the structure of the system as a resource for problem solving. So to fulfill these contradictory requirements, additional hollow tubes of the motorcycle frame can be used to store fuel. Also, a specially designed fuel tank can be used to shield the driver from dirt and debris. So here you can modify the system structure to get increased storage of fuel. Now in our situation, we want to be able to measure the length of these venomous snakes. And we want to do it with inexperienced labor, right? So what is our system? What is our system? It says, name the system you wish to improve. What is the system we want to improve with our poisonous snake problem? So we want to be able to measure the length of the snake. So the snake is our system, right? So it says this topic might seem trivial, but it's actually one of the most important topics, because by answering this question, we're determining the systematic level from which to consider the problem. So if the snake is our system, how might we modify the system structure to give us a better chance of measuring the length of the snake? So if the snake is our system, is there anything we can do to the snake that would make it easier for us to measure the length?
Diet.
Huh?
Diet.
Cut off the fangs? Okay. So remove.
Cut off the fangs.
Okay, so remove.
There's no venom there. How do I explain the venom? Put the
So
snake to
that's
sleep
our
first.
idea, so we're going to type that in. So now we don't evaluate the ideas at this point in time, we just record them. Later on, we'll evaluate the ideas, so right now we're just recording them. So one idea, now that might be a great idea, but later on we might decide that, well, removing the fangs of the snake could affect the way it eats, and maybe that would affect our experiment. So we'd have to have those kinds of discussions later on. But right now we accept this idea. Anything else we can do to the snake, which is our system, to help us better be able to measure it?
Tranquilize the snake.
Tranquilize the snake. Great. Great idea. So we could tranquilize the snake and then measure it. That spurs another idea from me, which is, you know, sometimes snakes get very lethargic as the temperature gets decreased. So maybe you can decrease the temperature till the snake becomes very lethargic and then measure it. So we could decrease.
Put it into a hibernation.
Yeah, so we hibernate the snake. Huh? Oh, the flute, yeah. Hire a snake charmer to... What do? We use a flute and a basket, or a flute and a basket to charm the snake?
We have to go all the way to India.
Yeah, we have to get someone from India to help us. We ate at an Indian restaurant today, so we should be in the right environment. Anything else we could do to the snake itself, the system, to help us measure it?
feed the snake. Feed the snake. Feed the snake.
Pardon?
Feed the snake.
Feed the snake?
What do you mean? Lazy and easy measure it.
Overfeed.
Huh?
Overfeed. Overfeed.
Oh, overfeed. Make the snake sleepy? Overfeed?
Does it not feed sleep?
Okay, that's an idea. What if I put a strain gauge on the snake and then measured some change in the strain gauge? Or maybe I could tattoo the snake's body with some tattoo lines and then measure the distance between the marks over time. So maybe attach a strain gauge, measure growth. That'd be an idea. Maybe another idea would be to tattoo or mark the snake and measure distance between marks.
Maybe roll the snake into a cylinder, transparent cylinder.
Okay. So make the snake
Slither.
cylinder and measure the snake with markings in the cylinder. Okay. So that might be something on the super system, but it's still a very good idea. Because if the snake is our system, then the super system would be the cage, right? So right now we're working on the system. Are there any other system things we could do to the snake itself that would help us measure it?
Hang the snake.
Hang the snake, okay? Periodically, hang the snake to find its length. Which gives me an idea, maybe I could kill the snake and then measure it. Kill the snake. You know, maybe I grow lots of snakes or raise lots of snakes. Maybe if I raise 100 snakes and I kill one every week, it's not such a big deal, right? So we grow many and kill every week.
Discovery sample.
Pardon?
Discovery sample.
Not the same. Anything else I could do to the snake to measure it? Weigh it, okay, weigh snake. Weigh the snake in the cage. But then I have to have some correlation between weight and length. Which gives me another idea, which would be maybe to attach some sort of expandable collar. That as the diameter grows, we get an electronic reading of that, and we can convert that back to, again, correlate to length or something. Maybe have an electronic collar to measure diameter and correlate. Anything else I can do to the snake?
Tie the snake, and we put a nice mouse in front of it. So as the snake, fetch the mouse, so they can measure it.
Okay, give me the idea again.
You just tie the snake,
Tie the snake.
and then you put a nice mouse here.
Like putting a carrot in front of a horse.
So the snake try to fetch.
So you're saying
Try
like
to catch the mouse.
put a rope on the tail of
Yeah.
the snake, and then as the snake stretches out to catch the mouse, you get its length?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit
So
stressful.
constrain
It's stressful for the snake.
snake with a rope, and when the snake stretches to catch a mouse, measure. Okay. What about the super system? What elements from the environment can eliminate the problem altogether, or at least reduce its severity? So here's an example of using northern pulpits. Snow is blown into the area to prevent accumulation. Snow accumulates and slowly melts, cooling the air as it does so. So to reduce coal dust explosions. So if the snake is our system, the super system is the cage or the environment. So what can we do to the cage or the environment to help us measure the snake? Now I think some of these ideas already deal with it, like have the snake go through a transparent tube would be part of the super system. Having a scale in the cage to measure the weight of the snake would be part of the super system. What other ideas? What can we do to the cage itself to help us to better be able to measure the snake?
Gas chamber. The gas chamber.
Gas chamber?
Gas is snake.
To
Poisonous gas. Poisonous snake.
we use the gas to
It's
put the snake to sleep. Okay, so turn the cage into a gas chamber. Put the snake to sleep. Okay. What else could we do? What else could we do? Graduate the cage. The cage. How are we going to measure it with the cage graduated? Okay, but then how are we going to get the snake to stretch out or?
Then they use the mouse. Then they use the mouse. Still gonna use the mouse.
Because we've already got the idea of marking a tube and getting the snake. Somehow, we have to get the snake into the tube. So maybe wherever, the cage is in two parts, and there's a tube between the two parts, and you put the mouse in one part of the cage, and then the snake has to go through the tube to get the mouse. So while it's in the tube, it has to be straight, and then we can graduate the tube. So we have that idea. What else can we do to the cage?
You can put a camera.
Okay, use a camera. Say camera. And measure the length of a picture. Okay, that's an idea. Train the snake. Train the snake to lie flat. And use a graduated. So you just tell the snake, assume the position. It does that for you.
Tell the snake to slip.
Ah. What else can we do to the super system, the cage?
We use a vacuum system cage to control the temperature.
Okay, we can control the temperature with but use a vacuum. You mean suck the legs straight with a vacuum?
Yeah, pressurized. And kill the snake.
Snake into a tube using a vacuum. Okay. Snakes shed their skin. Well, I was wondering if if you could somehow pour some latex over it, and then it would shed the latex like it would shed a skin, and then you could measure it. Huh? Well, it's just an idea. I mean, let's pour latex on the snake and let the